You listen to XRAYFM at KXRY Portland and KQAC HD3 Portland and at 107.1 and 91.1 FM and streaming online everywhere at XRAY.FM. The hour is now 10 p.m. Pacific and you're tuned in to Past Haunts. I'm your host, R.Barrows, here every Monday night, occupying the late night hour with an array of music of my own choosing. But as most of you listeners who have been tuning in over the past 5 weeks are familiar with the fact that I've changed up format just for a little bit and have been focusing on motorcycle-related broadcasts, inviting guests from the greater Portland motorcycle community to come in and talk about their involvement with the scene here. And there is no exception to that tonight because of how successful the past month has been and how many people have been asking about, me to continue it on. I decided to extend it out, and I think the fact that it's also snowing tonight is a great indicator as to doing just the right thing, as we motorcycle enthusiasts out there are not able to ride in these winter times. We got to do something to fulfill that void. So I've got special guest in the studio with me, Mike Tyler from the Mighty Garage, Oregon Norton Enthusiasts, and the Vincent Club, amongst many other projects and efforts. He's going to take over the airwaves with a selection of music of his own choosing and do a little bit of Q&A. But with all that said, I want to give a big welcome to Mike Tyler. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here tonight. Mike is a ambassador of the Portland vintage motorcycle scene here. He restores old bikes, is a huge enthusiast, is a member and major role in the Oregon Norton Enthusiasts, and as well as the Vincent Club, right? Am I capturing that all correctly?
Yep, that's it.
And we're also joined by our special documenter of the night. Mr. Dave Friesen is back in the studio. He was here a couple weeks ago with the folks from the PDX Motorcycle Film Festival. And if you missed that broadcast, again, you can catch it over on our website, XRAY.FM. So, Mike, in the studio, how's it feeling so far?
So far, so good.
Excellent, excellent. I want to give listeners a little bit of a background on your history with motorcycles and the general involvement, how you came to love them and appreciate them. And I want to start off with first asking you, what's your very first memory of a motorbike?
Oh my gosh. When I was a kid, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah, just at school and lots of bikes at school and mopeds was the big thing. Getting to your moped, the 50, well, it couldn't be 50cc, it had to be under 50cc. So that was the big aspirational goal for most of the kids in my school. So,
and coming from Great Britain, where the mod scene sort of bloomed, was a lot of the kids that were riding mopeds, were they part of that whole mod thing, or was that kind of past that era?
A little. There was sort of a little leftover from that. So we'd get the guys that were riding the Lambrettas and the Vespas, and then you'd get the guys that were riding the mopeds, the mini motorcycles. They were the rockers. Yeah.
And did you find yourself immediately being fixated by them, wanting to, have one of those experiences, or did your obsession kind of start a little bit later on?
No, I've had it since I was a kid. Building bicycles when I was a kid. Actually, that's what I did. So I made bicycles. I went to the dump or the tip, whatever you would call it.
Yeah,
and,
the junkyard.
The junkyard. Yeah, and I'd pick up old bike frames and parts of bicycles, and I'd fix them up and sell them in the classifieds.
So,
and then
what around what age were you when you were doing this? What was the earliest?
Maybe 12,
okay.
11, 12, something like that.
Wow. Okay, so you and your dad would go out in the landfill, pick up old bike parts and assemble.
Yeah, Sturmey Archer gearboxes, 3-speed gearboxes for a bike, and build bicycles. And there'd be old bike shops downtown and put bikes together, stick them in the classified ads. It was all in the newspapers back then, and sell them, and then put the money into an account, and then that ultimately became the source of my first moped.
That's awesome. And so at what point did that fascination grow beyond the bicycles and seeing the the mopeds and scooters at school? When did you really get into your first motorcycle?
Oh, it was a little later. I got into mopeds and then got a car, and then it was a little while later, I think. And that's when I picked up a first motorcycle.
What was that?
BSA Bantam. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, how many cc's was that thing?
Oh gosh, what was it? 175.
Wow.
Yeah, D175 it was, 1970.
At that moment when you got that first bike, you were like, oh man, like this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah,
and then I became part of the Vintage Motorcycle Club in the UK, and kind of really got into it then. And that was a small bike as well,
Yeah.
The older guys had the bigger bikes, and so although most of the bores out there in the UK, the size of the engines, are generally smaller than they are here in the States. The bigger bores came out to the States, to the rich Americans.
Do you find it kind of odd that so many Americans fetishize these classic British bikes, or was it pretty commonplace for you to see these Triumphs and these Nortons and these BSAs everywhere? And out here, we see those on rare occasion. We're like, oh my gosh, that's like the most dream bike.
Yeah, I think the difference between Britain and America, certainly going back even before I was younger, was that the motorcycle was the daily driver. That was all you had. Mm-hmm. In Britain, certainly after the war, and then beyond that as well. Yeah. So it was a mode of transport. That's all they had. Whereas Americans, I think, generally speaking, they had a car. They always had a car, and the motorbike was in the garage. More like a toy or a recreational vehicle at the weekends, a hobby, yeah. And so that's why British bikes or British bikes in America seem to be so much better preserved than the Brit. Plus, it rains a heck of a lot more over there as well. They rust out a lot more.
Do you feel like the Harley Davidson experience on the American shores, did that cross over to the UK at all? Were people in the UK fascinated? And be honest,
not for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so. Not when it was probably more Japanese than American. Certainly when I was growing up. So that was the start of the Japanese bikes. And so, for example, when I was at school, it was the Honda 250 Superdream, 250N, and Yamaha RD350LC 350, and the Fizzy. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of the
Yamaha Fizzy. It was a FS1-E. That was the moped of choice when I was a kid at school.
Do you take pride in the heritage of the British bikes in the way that I feel like a lot of Americans take pride in the history of Harley Davidson and Indian bikes?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's a big part of what we do within the club is just try and keep as many of these bikes on the road. We do our best. We come together a lot as a group, as a gang. Not that kind of gang, different kind of gang. Yeah, we do a lot to keep the bikes on the road and preserve them and work on projects together. And it's such a thrill, to go to the Horse Brass pub every month and see a lineup of all British bikes outside. It's really great.
It is. It's very breathtaking to see all those bikes there. Yeah. So let's get back a little bit. I think we jumped ahead to crossing the shore already. So at what point did you cross shores?
1997.
1997. And did you bring a bike with you?
I didn't.
Okay.
I always say that I sold my AJS to fund my passage to the New World.
Any regrets, remorse?
Oh, yeah. No, not coming here, but selling the bike for sure, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And then when you landed, did you immediately feel like I need to get a bike right away to replace the one I lost, or did you take a little bit of time?
It took a while, you know, to get established and, let the job settle in and everything. So it was a while before that happened, and then came across an old Triumph on Craigslist, and that was it.
Is that the Triumph that's in the garage?
It is.
All right. Tell listeners a little bit about that bike. Tell them what year, what make, what model, and how long it took you to get it from from the position of where you received it to where it is today.
Sure. I got it in Southern Oregon. It was on Craigslist one Sunday morning. Just impulsively, I answered the ad and drove down, got some money out of the bank, drove down there, picked the bike up, and that was back in 2010, I think. Mm-hmm. And then spent about 3 years restoring it. It was like nut and bolt restoration. Yeah. Everything, every single part of the bike, from what it was to what it became. It's a 1956 Triumph T110, Tiger 110. It's a pre-unit Triumph motorcycle, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had the privilege of being in your garage, and I know that it's kind of positioned in a way that it kind of takes the glory of the room. It's kind of like that trophy on the shelf a bit. Do you feel like that's a bike you intend to hang on indefinitely?
I think so. I think I've got too much sweat equity and love into it.
At what point did you feel like you wanted to start joining the clubs?
I'd been going to lots of events. Mm-hmm. We have an annual vintage club meeting down and swap meet, and a great big show down at Corvallis every year. It's fantastic, actually. You can find that on the Oregon Vintage Motorcyclists website. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go there. I'd been going there a number of years, and so I think I was a member of the OVM back then. And then just one bike led to another. I think they were breeding. I'm not sure, but there is a scientific formula. I don't know if you know.
I don't.
Yeah, it's quite complex, but it's the scientific formula for the number of motorcycles that you should have in your garage is it's N+1. where N is the current number of motorcycles that you have at any one time.
I like that equation. You're going to have to sell my wife on that sometime. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. We're going to dig into a couple songs from the good old days. So why do you do that? And I mean that in the nicest way. Like, you offer your time and your space and your energy, and at times your financial aspect of it too. You contribute towards parts on bikes. I've seen. What's the benefit for you?
I get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really do enjoy hanging around and tinkering with motorcycles. It's just a great distraction from my day job.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty intense job
Mm-hmm.
during the day, and just an escape, I think, from all of that. Just to get in the garage, work by myself, and all with members of the club as well. That's a lot of fun. And then just to hear a bike burst into life as well, and it makes it all worthwhile, actually. Just the accomplishment, I think, of getting a bike that's been stood. I mean, some of the bikes that we've worked on have been laid up for 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And so you think then you're never going to get them running again, and then they do. It's just a process of just restoring them bit by bit, part by part. And a neighbour of mine used to say, on the Triumph, he'd come over and, he'd have his hands on his hips, and he'd, look at the bike. He didn't know much about bikes, and he'd say, "So how do you know this thing's going to start?" And you don't. It's kind of like a leap of faith, but you have all the ingredients that you need.
Yeah.
You've got fuel and compression and a spark, and that should be the making of a restart.
Yeah. So it sounds like the one thing that I really heard from that phrase, from that recap, is the sense of accomplishment. And you're essentially bringing something back from the dead in a lot of cases. And what is it in particular about that sense of accomplishment that you feel is something you want to continue to share with other people? Because, like I said, you could just be doing your projects at all times and still getting that sense of accomplishment, but you choose to kind of selflessly donate your own resources to help other people's bikes. What about that part of it, giving to other people, is satisfying for you?
I think I'm aware of the fact that there's fewer and fewer bikes and fewer owners with older bikes now as well. We see that it's generational, definitely. And I think it's really important for us and our club to try and help keep some of those bikes and keep the energy and the spark going, so that we can keep more of those bikes on the road. Because if we don't, they'll just sit in garages and rot away, and then you lose interest in the club, and before we know it, we have fewer club members, and we've had several club members come back to the club, and we've got their bikes back on the road again, and now they're active club members, and we have a great time. It's really enjoyable.
So let's talk a little bit about the clubs and how you got involved. You mentioned that obviously Dave kind of introduced you to the Oregon Norton Enthusiasts, which you're now the president of the club. How did you move into that role in the presidency, I guess?
It's one of those situations where they say, would anyone who would like to be the president stand forward?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else took a step back, and I was too slow, I guess.
Do you find that additional responsibility also gratifies you in a way that you wouldn't be able to get that doing it by yourself in a garage?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's great teamwork. There's some fantastic guys in the club, as Dave will attest.
Mm-hmm.
They've forgotten more than I know, and so they really are very, very clever.
Mm-hmm.
They know the bikes. We've got world-class professional restorers, restoration experts, engineers, artists. We've got a full range of very different, diverse personalities, and we all come together because we love vintage motorcycles, and so it's great. It's just a really enjoyable experience, and tapping into that and bringing folks together. And we've got, I think, maybe more than 75 club members and 70 plus Nortons that you would never know that they were in this area.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty intense area, Portland and Oregon. You wouldn't think there'd be so many vintage bikes in the area, and that's just the Norton Club. If you start talking about the Oregon Vintage Club, there are hundreds of bikes that are out there, and you see a lot of them at the Corvallis show, and it's just really a great event to go to.
Yeah, highly recommend anyone out there who hasn't been to one, check out the Corvallis show. Now, kind of being forthright to the audience out here, I'm a member of the Oregon Norton Enthusiast Club, and how do I say this tastefully? I think I'm one of the younger members of the club,
Yeah.
and how do you feel, or do you strive to make sure that the clubs stay inclusive of all ages, all genders, all backgrounds?
We do. It is a challenge. Actually, you brought the average age of the club membership down by about 30 years, so thank you for that. We do appreciate it. And no, we do. It's again, I think it's this generational thing. So the younger guys that probably are your age or maybe younger, they're more into Japanese bikes because those were the bikes that their dads had, perhaps as well. So you're a little.
I'm an oddity.
You're an oddity. You're an exception to the rule. So the guys that we hang out in the club, they had them when they came out in the 60s and the 70s. I was a little late for that myself, but very much still relevant when I was growing up. And so it's a challenge that we have actually within the club at the moment is trying to get younger and maybe a more diverse club membership.
Because you also run a YouTube channel, which people can find at, what's the website again?
It's themightygarage.com.
That's right, themightygarage.com. And if you go to the website, you can view just these volumes and volumes of videos that you've captured and rendered of you doing tech sessions and you working on your own projects and working on other people's projects and documenting events here in Portland and documenting club meetings, and you just really go above and beyond to just document as much as possible within the Portland motorcycle scene. And I was curious, what was the impetus for that? Where did that evolve from?
Well, it started as a blog with the Triumph rebuild. It was more like a diary to myself, actually, to make sure that I kept myself honest in terms of how the build was going. And that turned into a YouTube channel that was just a basic account. That's where Might I started. Just an abbreviation of my name, actually. It was the first thing I thought of. And then that's turned into, or is turning into, Mighty Garage. But that was back in 2010, 11, 12. That was really, as I look back now at my videos, it's me and my camera or whatever and shaking all over the place and the audio quality's terrible, but that's something I've really enjoyed over the last few years, and I'm trying to get better at it. Clarity of audio and lighting and precision, and certainly as far as the Vincents are concerned, I've been working on a Vincent project, and I'm very conscious that there's a very critical audience out there that's watching my every move, and so I'm super fastidious about how I approach a project. I do a lot of research, a lot of reading up, and so there's hours that goes into the making of a very brief video.
Which is something that I think, a lot of your viewers probably don't take into account, which is great to hear on air right now. How do you find that balance between, you work your day job, you have a family, you are, a member of numerous clubs, you have numerous projects. When do you start to feel the burnout?
When there's a lot of events happening simultaneously, that becomes a little overwhelming. I've got a lot of footage to go through and edit. So for example, we're working on a Norton project, and then we'd have a club meeting, and then we had the film festival, and then the one show's coming up, and to try and capture all that and publish in a timely way, because I feel that there's some time sensitivity, especially as it relates to our club events and meetings. I like to try and get the video out as near as I can to real time, so that it feels sort of recent, it feels current and relevant. This happened this morning, guys. We were on a ride today, and it feels just more more connected, I think.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about how you find the time to do these things. As I mentioned, you are in numerous clubs, you've got a family, you've got a job. Where does this time come from?
Well, I put it all down to America's Got Talent, So You Think You Can Dance, and World's Greatest Dancer, whatever all those shows are. As soon as those shows come on TV, I run into the garage. So my wife and daughter are a dance mom and a dance daughter. So as soon as those shows come on, I'll say, okay, see you in an hour.
You love them.
I love those shows. Love them.
You got to support them. All right, well, I think I got time for about, the question or so here. And another one I wanted to get was, what is your strategy when you do decide to take on a new project? Do you really do all the research right up front and take as much of that time that you need to really figure out the problem before even digging into the bike itself? Or do you kind of just see how it goes from whatever you first start tinkering with?
So I bought this recent bike on an impulse, so there was no strategy whatsoever buying it. It just happened to come my way. But yes, now that I've got it, I'm pretty analytical in terms of how I approach a project.
Yeah.
So it's just assessing the bike. My father-in-law says, give it a good coat of looking at. He's from Yorkshire in north of England, and so he says, just stand back, look at the bike, understand what it needs to get it to working again. Take an inventory, take stock of it, get some boxes, and then start disassembling or looking at the scope and the extent of the restoration. And sequencing is also a big event as well in terms of how long certain things take to get an engine rebuilt or a frame straightened.
Well, thank you again for being here tonight. And if anyone, again, missed any part of tonight's set, you can catch it at our website at xray.fm. Mike, I got one last question for you, and you have to be honest. Absolutely honest. Brutally honest. How often do you have to go back and refer to your own videos to remember what you did to your bikes?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's why I started making the videos in the first place.
Documentation of where the bolts go?
As I lose the memory, at least I've got the videos to go back to.
Well, thank you again. Let everyone know one more time, how do they get to your YouTube page?
So it's The Mighty Garage, all spelt out as one word, THE, Mighty, MIGHTY, garage.com. It will take you to a YouTube channel, and I'm working on a website, so that will come eventually.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Stick around for Hipster Suck with DDD JJJ666 in just about 5 seconds or so. Catch you all next week with another special guest. Stay tuned.
Hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. KXRY Portland Bay broadcast material that could be found terribly offensive to some dudes and dudettes. And
You did great, Mike.
Are neither
That was fantastic.
as those that are